Hey everyone, hope everyone's doing well and staying safe these days. Here's a quick unboxing, very quick unboxing, and for a pretty good reason as you can see there, but also installation and motherboard review of the MSI B650i Edge WIFI motherboard. This is actually the ITX form factor variant of the B650 Edge Wi-Fi motherboard, which I actually previously did a review on. Definitely go ahead and check that out. I'll put a little link in the description below. So you can see here, I did actually get this used off Amazon. And I wish the box wasn't so beat up and everything. They literally put packing tape here, the sticker here that is impossible to get off without ripping some stuff off. Looks like the label on the side has been removed. And I'm probably going to guess some stuff is actually missing, besides the motherboard and maybe the antennas and some other stuff. So I'll take a look in the back here. We can see some more details on basically all your USB ports that are available here. Looks like an HDMI port, your audio ports, the little Wi-Fi connectors, and some little buttons here to go ahead and actually update the BIOS on this motherboard without a CPU and memory being present. And also a little button to reset the CMOS perhaps. Some little details here as well too. And you can see this motherboard does have the backplate IO shield directly on the board itself. So let's go ahead and get this open here. Sorry again for the really poor condition of the box here. I did actually go ahead and take a look at this myself before taking it out, and I realized there is probably something missing here, and I'll get to that in just a moment. Here we have the motherboard and a little anti-static bag. Go ahead and take a look at that. So the antennas for the Wi-Fi hasn't been opened at all. Looks like we have this looks like our little LED cable perhaps. If you can be using RGB, there you go. And two SATA cables as well too, and that's pretty much it. So MSI definitely has been not including printed manuals for some time now. I would say since the later X570 motherboards, and definitely with the newer motherboards as well too. So the X670s as well. But and they do include a couple of little paperwork here and there, and maybe even a little thumb drive, and of course it looks like the screws for the NVMe M2 slots are actually missing here, or they were just used. Who knows what it is. I do have a bunch of spares also from MSI, so they should be perfectly compatible there. So just in case you are missing screws, some of those screws are very generic, and you can probably just really get just screws for, you know, pretty much what you need from any online retailer that sells computer stuff. I do actually get that question a number of times. You know, where do you get the screws to the motherboard, for example? You can definitely go on any particular online retailer. I like to use Newegg. Amazon's definitely another one, and Micro Center is another good one as well too. B&H Photo definitely does sell computer stuff, obviously. And just go ahead and look up basically motherboard screws. You'll see a slew of results right there. You know, basically the entire screw kit that you're going to need. So let's go ahead and unbag this. And here we have, very easy to remove, small ITX form factor motherboard. Very small here. I do have this in mind for a media PC that I'm going to be upgrading from a previous generation of Ryzen processor, and just get it going here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the board. Taking a look here at what's going to be the rear of your motherboard and computer when you actually get this installed and get it going. Here we do have a clear CMOS button right there, and it looks like a flash button as well too. So you do have the ability to flash the BIOS on this if without a CPU or memory being present, which is very useful if your motherboard currently does not support newer generations of CPU. In this case, let's say the 9000 series, and you don't have a 7000 series CPU to actually go ahead and get this upgraded. Sometime back, I believe AMD would actually send you a CPU to temporarily borrow, and I believe in the cooling unit as well too, a CPU fan cooler. And you can actually go ahead and just use it temporarily. It's basically a loan, so you have to send it back so they don't charge you, and I believe they allow you to keep the fan and CPU cooler sometime back here, but this function here does allow you to just no longer need to use that kind of process when you need a CPU in general. Just next to it, on the right, we do have an HDMI connection. Most Ryzen CPUs now have onboard graphics, so you'll be able to take advantage of that as well too. If you plan not to use it, you have your own dedicated video card from AMD or NVIDIA or even Intel nowadays, you can go into the BIOS and just disable the onboard graphics and use the dedicated graphics card there as well too. Here we have two USB 3 ports. As a matter of fact, I believe all of them are pretty much USB 3 or above. We have two blue ports here, two red ones. And right to the right there, we do have a USB-C port right here and another USB 3 or even higher connection right there. And just above, we do have a 2.5G Ethernet connection. Very useful there as well too if you're going to be using this through wired. I'm actually planning to use this through wireless, so hence the little Wi-Fi antenna connections right over here. Bear in mind, if you do not actually have the antennas, the Wi-Fi will work. But unfortunately, the signal is going to be, basically the reception is going to be really bad. But this also affects Bluetooth as well too. So if you do plan to use this for Bluetooth only and not use it for Wi-Fi, good idea to go ahead and connect those antennas. Otherwise, as soon as you move a foot or two away, whatever you have linked to your Bluetooth is not going to be working anymore. And trust me, I've definitely seen that happen. Headphones, little Bluetooth speakers, etc. Here we have our basic audio connections here. The one connection I really hate not seeing present on the ITX class form factor motherboards is basically the little optical connection out, which I really do like to use to connect to a soundbar. And that unfortunately just kind of defeats the purpose there. I did have another ITX base motherboard, and it also did not have that as well too. So just something to keep in mind if you are going to be taking advantage of the optical out, digital out, it unfortunately is not going to be present here. So because everything here is in such close proximity to each other, I've actually just turned a little light here, so hopefully I can just get a better view, give you guys a better view here. For example, this is a good example right here. We can actually see 1, 2, 3 total connections just to the upper left of the main PCI Express slot. One of them appears to be a USB 2 connection right over here, very standard. You can actually see if I can show you that. You can actually see the USB letters right there. Actually, it looks like there's 4, so sorry about that. Next to that, looks like we have the actual audio connection. For front audio connections, when you have those little stereo headphone and microphone jack, you can actually go ahead and plug that in there. Of course, if you dare to try to overstretch the wire and plug it in there, but feel free to go ahead and give it a shot. Right over here, just in the middle between the USB and the audio connections, we do have the connections there for your front panel connections, such as hard drive, power button, power LED, and all that good stuff. So even though there's no universal connection for that, the actual locations become pretty standard that all motherboard manufacturers so far as I'm aware, have actually pretty much adopted. So very soon there's just going to be like one connection that you can actually plug everything in and take them all out, or eventually some cases are just going to have the same thing just leading one whole connection just leading into this whole thing here. Hopefully that can be removed so it can be adapted for older cases if you actually want to go ahead and do that. You do have that choice right there. Something to look forward to in the future. We'll see. And just right over here, as I mentioned already, that's your main PCI Express slot. There's only one here, and very likely you'll have a riser cable depending on what what case you'll be using here. So you'll be able to go ahead and connect your video card to that cable once you're all set. Just above here, we do have this little fan and little heat sink here that probably cools two things down. I'm guessing basically a chipset right there, but also right under here is your main M2 slot. There is an additional one in the back, which I'll demonstrate to you in just a moment. But right over here is your main M2 slot here. So obviously the little heat sink's being cooled down by this small little fan here. Hopefully it's not going to be too noisy like the original generation of X570 motherboards. Sometimes you can actually hear that fan just whirling around. So you're going to actually use a small screwdriver to remove these two screws, take this off, and access the NVMe M2 slot connection right there. Somewhere in that area, there's also the chassis intrusion connection, which unfortunately I just really can't pinpoint, but it's definitely there. A little 3 or 4 pin connection right there. Speaking of 4 pins, we do have a fan connection right over here. So you can definitely go inside and see that right there. Move that up out of the way. Just below the memory slots and to the left of this connection right here, we do have a USB 3 from panel connection. We actually have two. So this is your traditional blue port USB 3 from panel connection here. Right over here, we do have the USB-C type connection from panel connection over here as well too. I'm really happy they included this. Very likely anything newer generation Ryzen CPU is going to include this, but being that this motherboard is so small, I was a little concerned they wouldn't have it, and thank goodness it actually does. For the case I do have this intended for, there is no front USB-C connection. So it's a little bit of a lost call there, but definitely if you plan to use this in another case that does have one, no worries, you have it right there. If not, you definitely do have this one, which is pretty standard. And to the right of that, we have 4 SATA ports. I'm really surprised there's 4. Usually these boards come with 2, but go ahead and total 4 right there. If you do plan to use both the NVMe slots, I believe 2 of these ports will probably be disabled. So definitely go ahead and check out the instructions for that if you do plan to use that, and I'll go ahead and demonstrate that last NVMe connection in just a moment. Over here, we do have the 24 pin standard power connection. This thing is huge when looking at this little motherboard, pretty much almost half the size of the memory slots right over there. And to the right of that, we do have a total of 2 4-pin fan connections. I had to actually lean in a little bit because it looked like I almost didn't even see this. I tell you, with these little boards, you almost can't really see much. And just pulling this a little bit forward, we do have the 2 DDR5 memory slots right over here with 2 clips on the top. So if you're going to be using dual channel, you don't have to worry about getting them in the wrong place. There's only 2 connections for slots here for your memory chips. Now usually on the top we do have a couple of fan connections, usually a CPU and a pump, but it looks like those fan connections are actually right over here. You just have to figure out which one. The print is actually not really there, so you're going to actually have to refer to the manual to figure that out. There's actually really no connections here. The only one is right over here all the way to the right, and your 8-pin CPU connection here that you'll be using to plug in directly from the power supply to give the CPU the power it needs. Usually some upper tier motherboards do have 2 of these, 2 8-pins or 1 8-pin and 1 4-pin. I get a lot of questions if you actually do need to plug both of those in. Mind you, only need to plug in 1 8-pin. The other ones are pretty much redundant and only needed for, I like to think, for overclocking or overly powered CPUs, maybe exceeding 200 watts. So there's no harm in actually plugging them both in if there actually was assuming there was an additional 8-port connection or 4-port, but you definitely do not need to actually do that. Go ahead and just plug in the 8-pin, unless you actually receive instructions otherwise, or your CPU or overclocking abilities require using the additional 4 or 8-pin connection for your CPU. And just right above here, we do have that nice cover and very sleek looking heatsink under here, just covering everything else and keeping everything nice cool. And last but not least, the main portion here is basically where your CPU is going to be going, your Ryzen, I was actually about to say 7th or 9th generation, Ryzen 7000 or 9000 series CPU, or even another series of APU. That would be going right here in your AM5 slot. Basically, the motherboard has all the pins, so the CPU is pretty much pinless, and you can actually go ahead and plug that in there. I'm really hoping the standard stock cooler will actually go on this. I plan to use a regular stock cooler just for testing purposes, but I do have a water cooling unit from Be Quiet ready to actually use on this particular board. But let's see. I mean, the clearance here is definitely much smaller. Again, this is a very small board, so definitely go ahead and just keep in mind and try to do a little bit of hypothetical measurements and whatnot to see if the cooler you have in mind will actually fit in here. And I will be demonstrating this during the build, but you can easily just go ahead and push this down. The lever comes right up. Now on Intel motherboards, when you actually push here, it gives basically the whole thing a nudge and it just pops open like a drawbridge. But over here, you just have to go ahead and lift this up and you'll have access to the wonderful AM5 socket down there. Very scary to actually see all those pins and just even imagine one of them being bent. And that's a real problem right there. So there you go. I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate the installation setup there very shortly during the entire build process, which will probably be much shorter than my usual build considering the size of this board, and I won't be plugging in that much stuff into it. But here we are, and let's go ahead and get this into a motherboard, give it some power, plug in the video card into the riser if one is needed. I'm actually curious to see if you can actually just plug in the regular video card directly. I'm going to be putting this into a non-ITX case just for testing purposes, and see how that works out. So let's go ahead and hit it.
So we are fully booted up here. I did go ahead and update the BIOS here to the latest version here, so you can actually see it's already set to a BIOS build date of October 2024. When I originally plugged this thing in, it was from somewhere from 2023. So definitely not, about a year old, but a lot of updates probably could have gone by, and just a couple of firmware updates over in 1 year. So good thing to go ahead and update that when you get a chance. So hope everyone's enjoying the video so far. Hope everyone enjoyed the build. Definitely a different kind of build there, because I was actually working with a mini ITX computer case there, which I gotta tell you can always be a little troublesome just because everything's smaller, and the little fingers sometimes just can't really help you get cables around here and there. So hope you excuse me if I already had the power supply and the video card even already pre-installed there from the previous setup I had. Anyway, shoot a like and subscribe if you're enjoying this so far. Let's go ahead and jump into this little BIOS overview over here. Alright, so as with many BIOSes from MSI here, we do have an easy mode and an advanced mode here. So I went ahead and jumped right back to easy mode and go ahead and review some options we have over here. In the upper left, we do have a CPU speed, current CPU, and DDR speed. You can actually see I've already optimized the speed here and picked out the correct speed for the memory we actually have installed on this system. To the middle, we have current CPU core temperature, motherboard temperature, some other little details here, your BIOS mode, full motherboard name, CPU name, in this case the Ryzen 7 7700 8-core processor, 32 gigs of RAM, your BIOS version, and build day, as I said, I already went ahead and updated it to the latest version of October 2024. Over here, we do have some options to enable game boost here for your processor. And right here, you do have the option to go ahead and enable any profiles, overclocking profiles available for your memory chips. In this case, I've already enabled number 1, pushing the speed up to 6,000 megahertz. To the right over here, we do have boot priority. I went ahead and already disabled a couple of them here. I only have the main SSD, the NVMe drive that's currently plugged into the M2 slot, and also a USB thumb drive connection if in case I want to actually boot it up from USB thumb drive in the future. Feel free to go ahead and click on these or other options here. Just move them around as you need to. In this case, there's really not much to move around because I went ahead and disabled CD-ROM drive and other stuff, LAN connections there as well. In the middle left over here, we do have easy mode and some other options here. So if you want to go ahead and click on each one, you'll see specifically some options for, or be able to view some specifications for each one of those. In this case, looking under CPU, we can see here that's currently under 3.8 gigahertz for the frequency. We do see the clock, the ratio, core number, core voltage, and other little options there as well too. Over here, clicking on memory, you can go ahead and see on the only 2 DIMM slots we have here, 16 gigabytes of memory each, total 32, running at 6,000 megahertz over here. Underneath, you can see the available profiles that are built into the memory chips, and I went ahead and enabled profile number 1. Some chips, particularly from Corsair, will have multiple profiles, giving you different options and clock speeds. Clicking on the storage, we can see the current SATA mode as well too, as well as other connections here using all your SATA connections, and the M2 slots as well too. You can immediately see here I do have one NVMe drive connected here to the M2 slot, and you can also see here on all your SATA ports here I do have a mechanical hard drive of about 12 terabytes plugged in there as well too. Here under fan speed, you can go ahead and manipulate some options here for fan speed. In this case, as you saw, I'm using a water-cooled base unit, so fan speed is currently at 0. But you can immediately see if I jump into pump, you'll see some options here as well too, including the pump temperature and CPU temperature, including system temperature as well too. And then to help, some options over here you can see just by hitting some of these F keys and go ahead and jump into those particular options. On the lower left here, we do have the option to jump into the M Flash, which I already engaged in a little bit earlier. Once you click here, it will prompt you to go ahead and engage into M Flash mode, reboot your computer, and as long as you have a thumb drive in, you can go ahead and update your BIOS. Favorites here, you can go ahead and set up some hotkeys for favorites. And one of my favorite options on MSI motherboards for the longest time, hardware monitor over here, we can go ahead and manipulate fan speeds against temperature and RPM speeds here, depending on how you want to go ahead and manipulate them. In this case, CPU fan is currently not plugged in. We do have pump, system fan, and the little chipset fan you may have seen built on the board. Over here on the bottom here, you can go ahead and enable or disable current built-in options, FTFM, ERP, currently the built-in audio controller, which I've disabled because I'm actually using an external USB sound controller for this computer build, and some other options here as well too, as opposed to also turning on the RGB controls on the motherboard. Not to be missed, on the top here, we do have a couple options here. Up here we do have the F12. You can go ahead and hit on the F12 to do a screenshot. If you do have a USB thumb drive plugged in, it will immediately save a screenshot of what you're immediately seeing right on your screen. Search, go ahead and click here to go ahead and type in a search option, particularly in the BIOS if you're looking for a particular option. And up here you can go ahead and change the language as you need. That is it here for easy mode. We're going to go ahead and click here or just hit the F7 key to jump into advanced mode, which basically what you saw here when I engaged the BIOS in the first place. I'm not going to go over the top here because it's basically the same option, so you can see. Looking on the left side here, we can see the immediate option for settings, where you do have a couple options here. I'll go ahead and click on each one. System status, here you can go ahead and click on the system date and time, and see other options here as well. Advanced, we do have some options over here, PCI subsystem settings, ACPI settings, integrated devices here. Go ahead and enable or disable options, just like the sound card that I mentioned here earlier. Integrated graphics, as the CPU here, the Ryzen 7800 8-core processor I have built in here does have an integrated graphics. You can go ahead and enable or disable that here as needed. USB configuration, power management, BIOS mode as well too. You can go ahead and choose CSM if you plan to go ahead and boot up from legacy options. Wake up event setup, secure erase, which can immediately wipe out all the securely erase any data on your SSD or NVMe drive. MSI driver installer utility, which I'm going to go ahead and disable. This just basically prompts installing drivers for your chipset, device drivers as well too, immediately once you load up your OS. Since I already have everything already built in on these on the operating system I already have plugged in here, I'm just going to go ahead and disable it. Just mind you, if you do have this enabled, it's not going to prompt you every single time you reboot your computer. It's really just the first time. And AMD overclocking over here. Just remember, any overclocking settings you actually have in advanced mode here. Just know what you're doing. You could potentially damage your hardware as mentioned over here. Speaking of overclocking, go ahead and click on the next option here, which is OC. You can go ahead and explore some options over here. Some options can actually be turned off here by jumping into normal or expert mode, depending on which you prefer to use. Currently, I have it on expert. And you can immediately browse all the options we have here for your CPU overclocking, memory overclocking, and also voltage-related overclocking as well too. Just know what you're doing. You don't want to damage any hardware. One little option I always like to disable in MSI motherboards here, and this is just my personal preference over here. I go into advanced CPU configuration and go into AMD CBS and then disable the core performance boost. Now, this basically pushes the CPU to a higher frequency when needed. And I just went ahead and disabled here for the moment here, just because I'm basically just performing and showcasing the BIOS over here. I have noticed if this option is on and you're in the BIOS, the CPU core temperature can be in the 50s, approaching 60 degrees Celsius, even though I'm pretty much just exploring the BIOS. So right now it's actually at 47 degrees Celsius. Right after I updated the BIOS and this option was on, it was around 55. So just something to keep in mind here. Feel free to go ahead and re-enable it if you like, and take advantage of all the core performance boost that this particular option can offer. And just go ahead and scroll again through the overclocking options here. You do have the option to go ahead and enable or disable built-in profiles for your memory here. You can immediately see the profile number 1 displayed here, as it was showed here in easy mode as well too. Another little option here that's pretty good to enable here is memory context restore. It's usually set to auto by default, and basically having it on enabled will probably improve post and boot times. This basically, as you can see here, as opposed to having it retrain your memory every single time, this will only just be for times when the computer's been fully powered off, power yanked, or a new piece of hardware hasn't been installed. So if you're just basically rebooting over and over and over the course of weeks and months, there's actually a good option to go ahead and enable right over here. And the last option here on the lower left is M-Flash, which is basically the same option from Easy Mode. Jump into over here on the right side, we can immediately see OC Profile. Once you went ahead and changed some settings in the overclocking or even some other options in the BIOS, you can go ahead and save those as a default here. And I believe you can even go ahead and save these to USB or even preload them from a USB thumb drive if you plan to go ahead and update your BIOS and just go ahead and have those settings saved. Hardware monitor, as I went over already earlier. And beta runner, which does give you a couple of little options over here, as shown here. In the newer GUI for MSI motherboards, particularly with the later X870 chipset motherboards and even newer chipset motherboards as well too, this option does finally give you a little bit more detail, and it's always very helpful here. I do actually wonder if MSI will push the newer GUI to this particular motherboard over here, considering it's AM5 and also geared towards the AMD Ryzen 7000 and 9000 processors as well too. The latest BIOS actually updated here makes this motherboard does support the Ryzen 9000 series of CPUs. I was actually going to film this little ending section over here with the lights off, but it was a little hard to even see anything. It's kind of hard to even see the Be Quiet logo on the cooler there. I'm going to go ahead and turn the light on just to give you a little bit of a view there. You can immediately see the fans on the video card, and even the power supply are actually off at the moment. The only fans that are spinning are basically on the radiator there. Go ahead and turn the light off again. So a little bit of nice color coming from the water cooling unit over there and the memory chips. There's no other RGB colors as far as I know built on the motherboard, but you do have the available connections to put light around this thing. And still thinking about how to go ahead and light this particular case. Very tricky to really work your way around many ITX cases just because of the limited space. And also the cabling, you can even see the cabling pump cable over here is kind of in the way the cover I have intended for this case, which is tempered glass. We'll kind of push it down a little bit and make everything a little bit nicer to see there. So, but very, very quiet. Again, we do see the little chipset fan here, which can't really tell if it's on or off, but I don't really feel any airflow coming from it. Anyway, hope everyone enjoyed this video. Go ahead and shoot a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Have any questions or comments, be more than happy to assist here. This is actually a nice little motherboard I really had my heart on to get my hands on and really give a shot for this particular little movie PC build I do have hooked up to my main TV in the living room. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and as always, stay safe. Take care. Bye-bye.